Hi, everybody. Welcome to this little bit of extra help session on voice and tone. It's a little bit of an introduction for you. So voice and tone are very similar. In fact, they have some similarities to mood. So it's a little tricky figuring out what the difference is between them, and I'm going to try to clarify it for you the best I can. So we're going to leave off mood because we've talked about mood, and let's talk about what's the difference between voice and tone. So voice in a text is who the readers hear talking in a text. So in first-person texts, like all the stuff we're reading together now, that's usually the voice of the narrator. Who is that? What do they sound like? So here's a really good example of a voice from a well-known text. It's actually much better known as a movie, but here is the text. This is Ralph saying this, our narrator. And there it is, the house on Cleveland Street in Holmen, Indiana, where I spent the festering years of my childhood. Yes, sir, home in Indiana. Ragged vacant lots, American Legion halls and bowling alleys, woven together with a compact web of high-tension wires, telephone lines, and sewer pipe. This time every year, the wind would come screaming over frozen Lake Michigan, laying down great drifts of snow. The air would crack and sing, and power lines would creak under caked ice. Christmas was on its way. Lovely, beautiful, glorious Christmas, around which the entire kid year revolved. So that may sound a little familiar to you, coming from a different voice. That text I read to you actually comes from a book called In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, by an author named Gene Shepard. And his stories were turned into kind of a well-known movie, which you may have seen around the end of each calendar year, called A Christmas Story. I think TBS broadcast for like 24 hours on Christmas Day, starting Christmas Eve. So the voice that we hear in the movie, actually, the adult voice talking about his childhood, actually is the voice of Gene Shepard. It's the author, it's the voice of the author speaking as Ralphie in the stories in God We Trust. So it's a really good example of voice because we hear the narrator and what the narrator sounds like. So voice is a unique worldview. So, unique means just one. So everybody has a unique worldview. They're the only person who has that exact worldview. And the choices in words they use to tell their story. So that's really how how voice is decided. So if we look at a story like 11, which we just read, here is our main character narrating her story. And she says, "Not mine, not mine, not mine. But Mrs. Price is already turning to page 32 in math problem number 4. I don't know why, but all of a sudden I'm feeling sick inside, like the part of me that's 3 wants to come out of my eyes. Only I squeeze them shut tight and bite down on my teeth real hard and try to remember today I'm 11. 11. Mama is making a cake for me tonight. And when Papa comes home, everybody will sing happy birthday to you." So we can almost sort of like hear somebody saying this. And the author uses some strategies here to develop voice in her narrator. So for example, she does repetition. So notice here, not mine, not mine, not mine, beginning in the early part of it. And towards the end, I am 11, 11. That's the way people talk. And because that's the way they talk, that's the way their voice sounds, we can almost hear the author's voice. I'm sorry, not the author's voice, the narrator's voice here just in this text, even though, the author just puts the words on paper, we can't actually hear it. So another strategy is that she uses kind of conversational, the kind of things we say when we talk, but not so much when we write. I don't know why, but all of a sudden, that's kind of the way we talk, but we don't really write that way. Or things like, I bite down on my teeth real hard. Again, that's the kind of way we talk. So in order to develop voice, authors will frequently try to write in the way people actually talk, not the way they actually write. And one last way that authors can develop voice is by getting us inside the characters' heads, what their thoughts are. So here at the end of this excerpt from the text, we have Mama is making a cake for me tonight, and when Papa comes home, everybody will sing happy birthday to you. Well, that's her thinking into the future, right? Like her day in class is miserable. She's thinking, oh, it's going to be okay because tonight I'm going to have this, tonight I'm going to have this. So we sort of get into her head. What is she thinking about? So we get her voice. We get her unique voice here. That's a little different than tone. With tone is the way in which the author is doing the writing. So here I have this little comic, which I just happened to read at the same time I was working on this. And we see here a couple of kidnappers tying a guy up. And one of the kidnappers says to the other, will my tone come off as mean if I don't use an exclamation mark? So she's writing, there's like this ransom note, right? So she's thinking about how she's going to punctuate it because she knows the way she writes it is going to affect the tone. And she wants whoever reads this ransom note to sort of take it in a certain way. So the way we write really does affect our tone. So tone is about the author, the writer. So tone means the attitude shown in the writing. So the attitude of the author. And may include formality, objectivity, and intimacy. Now those last three words are hard. So I want to show you what I mean. So because they're not so hard when we actually figure out what they are. So formality is just, does the author use really formal language? It's sort of like proper language, proper English? Or is it really kind of informal, filled with slang? So, we have here two statements which say the same thing. We could say in a very formal, proper way, basketball is a very popular sport. Or I could say, everybody loves hoops. And those two things, say the same thing, but the formality is very different. So that's one way the author can develop tone, is by, do they use very proper language or do they use kind of informal or slang language? So then there's objectivity. And that comes down to, is the author telling us just facts and being truthful? Or is the author tell us a lot of opinion and maybe even not always tell us the truth? And sometimes that happens. So here's a couple of examples. So here's one that's sort of facty and truthful. I invited 10 people to my party, but 3 did not come because they had an invitation to a bigger party. So that's sort of fact-based, truthful. And then we have something which has more sort of opinion in it and maybe even some misinformation. Or some lies, basically. Just about everybody came to my party, except for a few people I didn't really want to come anyway. So you see, those are two ways of saying the same thing, but they have a very different feel, very different tone to the text. And the last one is intimacy. Is the author pretty distant from us and trying to keep us away and be kind of reserved? Or are they trying to pull us close and be very friendly with us? So here's another example. So the first one's kind of distant. As I walked toward the school door, I saw my old friend, turned, and walked the other way. The author's not really letting us in on how they feel, so the tone is kind of distant or reserved, versus this. When I got to school, I saw the girl who hurt my feelings so badly, so I turned crying quietly inside and walked back to the only place I still felt safe to be myself, home. So you see in that second version, it's the same story, right? But we get much more sort of personal, up-close details. So the way the authors allow us to get close or not, the language they choose to use, how truthful they are or how opinionated they are, those all affect the tone of a text. So here in 11, we get some attitude in this little bit from our author. Maybe because I'm skinny, maybe because she doesn't like me, that stupid Sylvia Saldivar says, I think it belongs to Rachel. An ugly sweater like that, all raggedy and old, but Mrs. Price believes her. Mrs. Price takes the sweater and puts it right on my desk, but when I open my mouth, nothing comes out. So you can see some attitude here, right? She says, maybe because I'm skinny, sort of implying or suggesting that whoever she's talking about is maybe not so skinny. She doesn't like me. She's stupid. That's an ugly sweater. It's all raggedy and old. You can see there's some attitude there. So that affects the tone here. The word choices the author uses. So your writing style and your attitude, the way you feel about your subject, whatever you're writing about, and your readers, how you feel about the people going to be reading it, those things combine to create your voice and tone. Now, you might be saying, well, wait a second, we already did mood, and isn't this the same as mood? But keep this in mind. Tone and voice, the stuff we're talking about now, that's about the author. That's about the writer. Mood is all about the reader, right? So it's all about feelings, yes, but one is the person doing the writing, one is the person reading the writing. So if voice and tone seem very much alike to you, if they seem pretty much the same to you, they are very similar. I'm going to be honest. And there are times, especially in first-person texts like the one we're reading, where voice and tone are almost kind of the same thing because it's the person telling us in their voice the story, and they're the author, so they seem like they overlap. But if you get the basic idea that tone and voice are about the writer, you're on the right track. But a simple way to think about this is that Tone is about the author. Voice is about the character created by the author. And mood is about the reader. So that takes us to the end of this review of voice and tone. But if you just keep thinking about this last slide, tone is the author, voice is the character created by the author, and mood is the reader, then I think you'll be in pretty good shape. So as always, if you're stuck and you're having any questions on this and you're not sure what to do, please ask, because that's why we're here to help.